Okay, to get an idea of how fast I should go through some of the material that was gone over at Defcon 16, how many of you actually attended the Defcon 16 speech? Raise your hand. Okay, so a pretty good number, so we'll go through it pretty quick. So anyways, our old humor was the whole like series of tubes of Ted Stevens, but this year since I said like, shacking DOCSIS, I'm like, okay, are you saying like we're, shacking up with our modems or something? I don't know, but anyways, it's so you guys already know the backgrounds of most of you. I do research with CERC. It's actually what was CERC, now it's S2ERC, Security and Software Engineering Research Center, which is National Science Foundation Industry University Cooperative Research Center. And this is Bitemytaco. He's a root admin over at SBHacker. And at Defcon 16 we covered DOCSIS 2 and below. And our last speech actually led to a huge number of people coming over to the SBHacker forums and discussing the modem technology, to include ISPs and contractors and everybody else. So what we're going to cover, pretty similar format to our last talk, is our requirements for our examples. We're going to do a previous speech overview, which I'll try to get through rather quickly since most of you are already familiar with it. Then we'll get into DOCSIS 3. Going to touch a little bit on PacketCable. Then I'm going to go over the United States versus modem hackers. If you guys didn't know, after our Defcon 16 speech, a number of people got arrested for making and selling modified modems. Then we'll go over some of the new tools and of course the new firmware, and then kind of basically leave it open for the future. So what do you need for our examples? A coax connection to the cable company. Now, everyone wanted me to stress that had seen the last speech that I'm talking about a legitimate connection to your cable company, because I guess supposedly I was telling people to climb poles or something, but I'm actually not. I'm saying, yeah, go ahead and pay for your connection to your cable company. In SPI JTAG cable, then there's a number of modems. Last time we were focused on the 5100 or the 5101. Now we're talking about the surfboard 6120, SPV 6220, DPC 3000, all DOCSIS 3 cable modems. Some soldering skills, or if you don't have soldering skills, SBHacker actually sells pre-modified modems, so then you can get around that. Then of course tools for flashing, which there's a number of those: USB JTAG NT, Haxomatic, which is a new thing from SBHacker, and you can always do it yourself cables. So as we covered last time, why is it possible? Well, manufacturers didn't really put any physical security into the modems, so it made it really easy to modify them. The software, the software was very easy to modify as well. Then of course the ISPs, CMTSs aren't configured properly. There's security flaws in CMTS and in the iOS. And my stance is DOCSIS really even a good platform? I mean, in terms of security, I would say no. But it's still, they keep pushing out new versions of it, new specs, and in my opinion it's not getting any better security wise, but it's still in use, so you can still do this. Quick cable network overview. You've got your cable modem termination systems, which is where your internet connection is going through. Your customer database is where it's going to do a lookup, and that's based on your your MAC address. Your operation support system is basically you call in and you have a problem, then they can hook into that, look at the CMTS, see power levels, all that good stuff, and then we have your nodes are basically out there in your neighborhoods. So the big thing we pushed last time, we're talking about anonymous internet access, and we used Comcast. Comcast is still the largest ISP, so we're still using Comcast. The whole idea is if you take a modem that's not tied to an account and you hook it up online, it's going to ask you to sign up for service. But if you change the DNS servers, and I don't know why this still works. I actually figured they would have done something to change this, but for some reason this still works. You change the DNS service or servers and you're online with a modem that's not tied to an account or anything. You're completely online. So then you have some other things you can do with config files to get it faster, or then we have disabling SNMP and things like that just to be a little more anonymous so that they won't be able to detect you as easily. Then once you get your anonymous access, like I said, a lot of this is all review, but anonymous access is good, but faster anonymous access is better. And as Taco says, don't forget kids, the faster you download, the bigger your penis is. Everybody knows that.
It's my forum signature.
Sure.
For the past 3 years.
Everybody's got a big e-penis. So one of the funny things to me is that even after our last talk, and we're pretty much showing them how this is all working. So we've got the DOCSIS 1, that's really not so much in use. You can still use it on most of the networks. But then you got DOCSIS 1.123. The config files from the last talk are still working on DOCSIS 3. To me, there's something wrong with that. I mean, but hey, whatever, you know. I guess they're still making money, so they're happy. Haxorware, you know, basically you go to it, it's got a web interface, you can configure all that stuff. When we spoke last time, it was pretty much like a beta type thing. As far as we know, all the bugs have been worked out. It's very stable, it's very good. I have a huge following over it. I think it's, you know, personally, it's, you know, leaps and bounds ahead of the Sigma firmware. Then we go techniques for remaining anonymous. Like I said, still just going through review. Disable SNMP. Hide the modem's HFC IP address. These are just commands you can do to do that stuff. Hide the reported software version. You know, because if you're using like some weird software version that isn't what because they'll actually push out updates to your modem, so you want to try to match that. Because if you don't match that, they're like, hey, why, you know, we push out an update to this modem, why is it on a different, you know, software version? So all these settings, you know, basically put them in and it will make your modem look more normal. That's the whole idea. You want to just kind of lay under the radar. Cloning, I know SBHacker really against cloning. I still said I want to go over it real quick. Yeah, you can clone modems. That's pretty much, I think, viewed by everyone as just really illegal, because you're taking someone else's modem settings and for like a true clone, taking their certificates and actually cloning that with your modem and getting on under their account. And so, you know, and especially in the nature that we can get on anonymously, why would you really want to clone someone? But we'll just leave it at don't do it. So that's a quick overview of that. That because they're on different CMTSs, you can clone them. Like you couldn't clone someone that's on the same CMTS as you. That's really the only restriction that you have. And then, actually, I think I'm just going to skip through this just because it's on the CD. If you want to do cloning, like we're pretty much saying don't do it, but if you really want to, the information's there. And this is always interesting to me is people always ask me, well, how anonymous are you? And from what I can tell, and from techs that I've talked to, people that work higher up some of the ISPs, they can pinpoint down to a node, is what I call a node, like a CMTS, yeah, a neighborhood, but not a specific house.
Or a tap.
Or a tap. So if you're like, you know, you're a big convicted hacker and you have a record, this might not be so anonymous for you. Because maybe if you pull off some large hack and they actually say, okay, we go to this IP address, it's not tied to an account, but we know it's in this general neighborhood. Are there any convicted hackers that live around here? Well, you know, there your name pops up. So I think it's still fairly anonymous, but it's not perfect. There's also, some ISPs will pull for poor signal levels. So the solution we gave is to use a drop amp. Had a pretty good response from that for people that were trying this stuff out. Said they were able to maintain good signal levels. Nobody had any, you know, any Comcast trucks or party vans or anything coming out and giving them a hard time. The ISPs sometimes do perform routine audits. I mean, sure you guys are familiar with, you know, your neighbor gets cable or something, the guy goes up there. If he's a contractor, he probably doesn't care. If it happens to be somebody that does care, they might look and say, hey, that tag's not supposed to be hooked in, and unhook it. And then, you know, some ISPs have adopted and implemented at a cost regional operating centers. I think you said South Florida?
Yeah,
somewhere?
South
Okay.
Florida.
He'll get into that later, but most of them haven't. So, list of precautions. If you're going to play around with this stuff, doing the, you know, diagnostic modem and actually putting modems online, personal precautions, I'd say don't transfer personal information over unencrypted connections, ever.
Sure, BPI is enabled.
Yeah. BPI enabled?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Keep an eye out for the party van, it's like to say. Cable technicians, FBI, whatever. You know, you see like a bunch of Comcast trucks coming, you might, you know, start unhooking your modems. Just a word of advice. Pay for service. I really, and I, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I strongly feel that if you're paying for the service, then it is going to be a lot harder for them to say that you're actually breaking the law. I think at the point that you're paying for service and you're putting another modem online, it's technically a terms of service violation, but not a theft of service. I mean, that's still arguable, but just saying it's better to pay for service. If you're actually paying for service, they're definitely not going to go after you as hard as they would if you're just blatantly, you know, climbing the pole, hooking it in, and ripping it off. Use the modified modems to test, confirm, diagnose your existing service. That's the legitimate reason for these modems. So if you're buying them, that's what you're buying them for, not for any bad stuff that you might happen to do. Be mindful of HFC MAC addresses you may choose to clone. I'm actually going to say precautions, don't clone modems. But that was a couple years ago. We were, giving people maybe potentially bad advice. And yeah, okay, the next one, don't do that. That's leftover. Don't cut line identifiers off of cable lines. So the previous firmware, yeah, sure. Like I said, we were a little riskier at Defcon 16, and we're trying to, we want to, because all the people were arrested, we're really trying to get this to be more legitimate. If we have everyone, I know.
There are plenty of legitimate uses. There really are.
Just saying, if we have people running around cutting tags off and hooking up modems, and get it somewhat legitimate. So the old firmware had all these different things it could do. I don't even really want to go over those, because I already went over the anonymous internet, and that stuff. Like I said, it's all, you can read it. And at this point, I would like to hand over to Taco and let him start going over DOCSIS 3. You want that mic or this? There we go.
I'll take it. Hey, everybody. So DOCSIS 3 has been certified by Cable Labs since our last presentation. Basically, it's just DOCSIS 2 with channel bonding, native IPv6, like it says, and optional AES encryption. Before they've been using 56-bit DES for BPI and BPI+. As far as the RF stuff goes, DOCSIS systems like in America, South America, use a 6 megahertz wide channel for the downstream. It can handle 43 megabits per downstream channel. EuroDOCSIS, if you're lucky enough to live in Europe, they have 8 megahertz channels, can handle about 55 megabits per channel. DOCSIS 3 spec calls for a minimum of 4 downstream and 4 upstream bonded channels. So basically, you're getting a lot more speed. Let's see here. So I had a little too much to drink before you come up here.
It's okay.
In America, basically, if you have 4 channels down, you're going to get up to 160 megabits, depending on what your cable operator offers. The potential for most upstream packages now get 10 to 15 megabits. The potential is for about 120. That'll come sometime in the future. The basic foundation of DOCSIS 3 is the two competing companies, Broadcom and Texas Instruments. Before, with DOCSIS 2, Texas Instruments had a garbage chipset. Motorola had a big fiasco with them. The 5120, it was a piece of shit. Comcast started pulling them from the field, blah, 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 long story short. Broadcom was the leader. Well, now with DOCSIS 3, Texas Instruments released the Puma 5 chip long before Broadcom released theirs. It's ARM v6 architecture. It runs Monte Vista Linux, open source of course. Right now there are 4 channels down, 4 channels up bonded on that CPU. TI just recently released an 8x4 Puma 5 chip, meaning 8 channels down, 4 channels up, to compete with the Broadcom BCM 3380, which is 8x4, which was really late to market, and the current firmwares for all those modems have a lot of bugs. And that runs on ECOS and its MIPS. How many people here have Haxomatic modems? Good. See a lot of hands. Y'all know Rajko then, the Serbian prodigy who wrote Haxomatic when he was 16 years old. He's now 18, and he plans on doing a Haxomatic 3.0 probably sometime around the end of this year for the Broadcom modems. The TI modems, Linux open source, anybody can develop for it, and we're trying to find more developers because the possibilities with that are quite endless. Let's see. Every modem manufacturer has a Puma 5 modem out. Motorola, Cisco, Aris, Netgear, SMC, you name it. And then the Broadcom modems. The Motorola SBG6580, it's a modem with a Wi-Fi in gateway. They released it about a month ago to Best Buy at retail, and they've already stopped shipping it because of so many firmware bugs. They released it with a serial port and a JTAG port, which they should have known better because, this modem hacking has been going on since, 2002, 2001. The next batch is supposed to have that stuff removed and hopefully some firmware bugs